Buenas tardes a todos, Majestad. Encantados de tenerte con nosotros. Es un placer y un honor. Señor Scorsese va a tener una conversación con Rodrigo Cortés a continuación. Es absolutamente tonto presentar a Martin Scorsese, pero en fin, diré que Martin Scorsese ha sido un hombre clave en la historia del cine contemporáneo y lo sigue siendo. Una de su última película está nominada a los Oscars y sigue siendo un éxito en el mundo entero en este momento. Pero Scorsese ya estaba haciendo, no sé cómo, pero estaba haciendo un corto el año 59. Es decir, lleva toda su vida haciendo cine y ocupándose además del cine en muchos otros aspectos. Es un cineasta muy prolífico, enormemente versátil. Ya me contaréis qué tienen que ver uno de los nuestros y la edad de la inocencia. Y es un cineasta que se ha interesado por el cine de los demás, por el cine clásico y por el cine de sus contemporáneos. Ha trabajado sobre el cine italiano, ha recuperado a gente como Michael Powell y Emmerich Pressburger. Ha producido películas de cineastas jóvenes en el mundo entero y cada vez que ve algo que le interesa se pone en marcha y consigue que eso tenga unas consecuencias positivas. Así que tener con nosotros a Martin Scorsese es un honor y un placer, y seguro que nos cuenta cosas estupendas, porque además debo decir que mi sensación es que es un hombre muy simpático. Así que muchísimas gracias y como personal homenaje yo le cantaría que es, por si alguien no la reconoce, porque mis dotes canoras son escasas, es el score de Taxi Driver de Bernard Herrmann.
They seem to know you. Gracias a la Academia, a los miembros, una sala a rebosar. A Su Majestad la Reina, por supuesto, que siempre no solo apoya esta industria, sino que como espectadora apoya sus frutos. Y, en fin, gracias incluso a Martin Scorsese. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Being with you. Of course, this is not going to be so much a talk. I'm going to throw you a few balls and do with them whatever you want, okay? So, it's been a while since The Big Shave, for instance. I don't know, 27 movies, plus the documentaries and...
27?
27?
I think so.
I thought you would know.
No, I don't.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
I try to keep going forward. Yeah,
Okay.
not looking back on, you know.
And I think there has been an evolution on what you do, not so much in the results. And let me explain this briefly, of course. If for instance, if you think on Goodfellas, I can picture yourself like doing this, and then the sea opens up. And now, probably from silence, especially on The Irishman, and above all on the last one, it's like you became a kind of old wise wizard, and now you move a finger and the sea opens up. and you can detect that on the cut, on the mix, even on the use of music. No Rolling Stones anymore. Things are like more modest in a way, more controlled, but the effect is exactly the same for the audience members. So,
Do we need to translate? Or?
no, I don't think so. They have.
I'm so sorry because my Spanish is so bad. I'm sorry. It's worse than my English. Yeah. And definitely worse than my Italian. Okay. No, I think what happened is that in these, as you say, 27 excursions into trying to create something on film, because each film is like a universe. It's a separate place that you live in for a long period of time. And that includes affecting your private life, too. I don't think in terms of years. I think in terms of Hugo, or in terms of Cape Fear, or Raging Bull. I forget the years. But in any event, I guess what I've been trying to find, or what I have come to realize, is that the technique, I've explored as much of the technique as possible for myself. That has a lot to do with camera movement, certain kinds of editing, certain structures in narrative storytelling. And that's why I do a lot of work with on separate films at the same time that are termed documentaries, but I don't like that term. I think it's a film. You know, it's nonfiction, maybe it's nonfiction, I'm not quite sure. But in any event, they're films that I could play with the structure like music, like a piece of music, because I think music is the purest form of art. And I've been trying to not necessarily intentionally do the same with the narrative films, but let it seep in. Let me start thinking that way, and don't be hemmed in or restricted by what is normally considered narrative. I don't know, if I've gotten anywhere near what I've been trying, but I don't want to be restricted by a straight storytelling. I have nothing against straight storytelling. By the way, straight narrative from beginning, middle to end is very difficult. You have a plot. I can't do plot. In that movie Departed, the hardest thing for me was the plot. I still don't know what happened in it. People, there are characters in Departed that I think they were working with the gangsters, but I think they may have been police. I still don't know. Neither did the writer. So I'm saying, well, why does the audience have to know everything? Why does the audience have to be led down the traditional way, which is beautiful? Why can't we find other ways of telling the story? And so what happened is that I stripped away the technique, I think, and something just settled in me about how to not get in the way of the maybe the philosophy of the film, the philosophy of the scene, of the shot. And it became a matter of structuring the film like The Irishman, which seems episodic, but not really. If you get to the second 2.5 hours in, you realize that all those episodes were leading to the major moment where he realizes what he has to do, what's expected of him, and then how he has to deal with it afterwards. His examination for his own redemption. He's trying to find that redemption, in himself, but he can't live with the door closed. And that's the last image. And so why do we need, in a good way, I love camera movement. I love the Soviet editing. In fact, I was just looking at Potemkin again, and Man with the Movie Camera, Dziga Vertov. I showed them to Francesca and her friends. But I don't know. I feel for me, in a way, I've explored that, especially like in tracking shots in Goodfellas, for example, the long take that goes into the Copacabana. At that time, when we did that take, there was no CGI. CGI is not easy. I'm not saying, everybody does CGI now. Easy to say that, but CGI is still very difficult. Yet, you could now match, what they called stitch, shots together so they look like they're one. Well, what if you couldn't? So we still had to do with a camera, with a light, with an assistant with cables going through the street. And they accomplished, Michael Ballhouse and my assistant director, Joe Reedy, and all of them accomplished something very beautiful. And after that, I said, why do I have to do that again? And is there anything that warrants that? Is it necessary? There's a story necessary for that again. And so for me, I always admire Brian De Palma's camera moves, like in The Untouchables, which ends with Charles Martin Smith. There's one great scene in the hallways and discussion. They go into an elevator and Charles Martin Smith gets shot. It has a narrative point, but I don't see that in my pictures. I don't see a long take with a narrative progression. And so I think we become used to movement with CGI. You can watch anything. If you have something on television, you're watching the news, that the commercials come up, or even public service announcements or tourist commercials come up, and these shots are amazing. And the camera goes flying everywhere. Well, what could we do then? You know, if the image doesn't mean anything anymore, then we have to reinvent the image. And so let's rip it all away and just stay and see what happens, and not imitate, the let's say Taiwanese cinema. That's Taiwanese. I can't do that. But it was a good inspiration, you know, and not imitate necessarily the cinema that is, or Romanian cinema, for example, really fascinating, I think. And so for me, it's like forcing myself to think again, or to feel again something different, and maybe not put myself in the way, to show I can do pyrotechnics of camera or sound, you know. And so that found its way into silence, and then especially The Irishman, you know, and now this film too.
Yeah, I felt that it was not a complaint at all. I'm not saying that you became more straightforward. It's more like the depuration or the sublimation of your art. It's like you were at the editing room and you felt, I know how to do that. I know how to do that. I don't need to move so much.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I didn't have to prove to myself anything, because now I got to get to the truth. What else have I got left? I got to find myself in here. Could I express myself without fancy stuff? Now you're in trouble.
Okay, so let's go in that direction. Let's talk a bit about editing, because if we name you, we need to talk about the edit. And you always explored a lot. There's been a lot of experimentation. You are not obsessed at all with continuity, just with emotional continuity. Actually, you are very brave. You don't care at all about any other kind of continuity. And still, your favorite cut, it's always straight cut. Nowadays too. You never did so many tricks. You go straight and you get something that's so powerful and abrupt. You still do. Even if there's, I don't know, a long movement and you think that is too long, you don't do a digital cut. Maybe you take out 9 frames and then you do just a simple solve and you go on, you don't care. So what's your relationship with cut, that magical word?
Well, when I was in my teens and my 20s, I was fascinated by the editing, as I say, of the Soviet cinema. And then at the same time fascinated by the long takes of Max Ophuls, Jean Renoir. But I really was fascinated by superimposition of images. And I was very much around the New York underground avant-garde cinema. These were, you know, bohemian people, poets, and people from all over the country living in a very different from the working class environment I came from, very, I guess, conservative Italian-American, Sicilian-American working class. But I found myself with all these people, actors and And they were playing, Stan Brakhage, playing with superimpositions of images, and I thought that was fascinating. And so for years, I was fascinated by dissolves and dissolving images. And I remember reading Otto Preminger once saying he hates dissolves, doesn't like dissolves, likes a straight cut. And it took me a little while to understand the power of the straight cut. And I like looking at his films, particularly the films he made in widescreen with these straight cuts. Maybe I don't like the story as much, but I like very much the way he placed the mise en scène, so to speak, and the camera moves and the crispness of the photography. There's a special nature to the power of these cuts, I think. And so that leading to certain cuts in Stanley Kubrick's films, particularly Lolita and The Shining, films like that. And so the impact of the cuts for me also came from certain British films where there was a restraint and a pullback. And suddenly it was straight cut, and you see a person's face and you realize, oh my God, the impact of that is so powerful. And I found that it eliminated a lot of excess that wasn't needed to be there. It just didn't need to be there. Why don't we just go straight in and push the audience right into it? And I think the cuts themselves are refreshing. And what I mean by refreshing, they're confrontational in a way. They push you way ahead in the story, even if the story is purely an emotional story, you know. And so for me, I found this to be a better format. I rarely use dissolves now. It's a strange thing, but I hardly use them. If anything, in The Wolf of Wall Street, it didn't matter because everything was crazy. And we just, in the middle of a scene, there's a scene where Margot Robbie arrives at a party and they take Leo DiCaprio over to meet her. And I can never get them to walk fast enough to meet. And I said, it's going to be panning over. I said, this is getting them tracking. We're going to waste this. So in the editing, I told Thelma, first of all, speed them up. So they go like this. But you don't notice it because it's just a little bit. And then she said, but it's still too long. I said, dissolve the bastard. Just take the piece out. Nobody's going to know. And suddenly they're there. It's like in Godard's Breathless or Viva sa vie. He just cut the middle out. The person gets up. She goes to talk to, in Viva sa vie, she goes to talk to a man in a restaurant for a job. It suddenly cuts and he's getting up and he has a piece of paper in his hand and she throws it away. You know what happened, you know. And so so many young people are making films now. I should say they're using the visual medium, they're using the visual image in such a way that the audience is way ahead of us on this sort of thing. And so I found that the best way of going about it is the power of a straight cut, if at all possible.
You do that even on the titles. You go from one cut to another. You never do elegant solves. Or for instance, at the beginning of Bringing Out the Dead, you remember that? You do a straight cut with the titles, and then you include the image of the ambulance together with the music of the harmonica.
Well, that came from the music. That came from Van Morrison. And specifically, I remember we talked about that last time. Then when you hear the drum roll at the beginning, automatically I knew that says so-and-so presents. I knew that, so I put that down. Then I drew a little picture of the face, and I knew that goes there. Then the harmonica comes in, then we go to the next title. So that was all drawn out, all little pictures. I don't see putting titles up anymore either. Opening title of a film, it doesn't matter because now I like the old Hollywood and the old world cinema, the way the titles were at the beginning, these beautiful backgrounds and wonderful calligraphy, and I like that. That's gone. It's gone. I did it in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Oh, we had the old-fashioned, you know, satin background, you know. But that's gone in a way. It's a different world. And ideally, if you could get the story started, meaning the film started as soon as possible, do they really have to sit through action that very often is a throwaway. Like somebody driving their car, drives up, gets out, goes into a house, and you see directed by, cinematographer, writer, producer, then assistant producers, associate producers, another producer, and more producers, and then the writer, and then they come in and the movie starts. What is that? Start the movie. Start the movie. The problem is, and I found this out many times, is that for the projectionist and for an audience, for a movie to start, they have to know it's starting. And that means that the projectionist has to make sure the sound is there. So there has to be a logo with sound, okay? Because then they think something's with the machine. Then they're going like this and they're breaking up. So you need the sound. You need a little bit of time for the audience to sit down and begin to. And I've been playing with that to shorten that time. But I found that, like, even in Killers of the Flower Moon, we have our logos, and then there's the scene with the pipe, with the Native Americans in the pipe. And so I took a chance there to ease the audience into it. But in Departed, another way, which was I was so revved up with Departed. I was just so, I guess you could say, anger has a lot to do with it, with the movies, generating the creativity. It just does. It doesn't mean that you're nasty to people, but it's an anger about the story, an anger about the world, an anger about just existence, a love of existence at the same time, a love of the world at the same time. So it's this constant battle. And I said, The Departed, I'm sick of this. Let's just start right with a shot from the news of a race riot in Boston with white guys taking the American flag and jamming it right into a black guy. I said that. And that was the opening shot. And from there, it goes crazier. You follow? And I just threw the audience right. Now, that goes back to, watching some films, some of the later films of Sam Fuller that were not very successful, but he started right in the middle of some action. Sometimes it was violence, sometimes it was action, so what the hell's going on? And then he takes you along. He wasn't afraid of anything, and a lot of what Fuller did was more like tabloid newspaper. It throws you into the story, And so for me, starting a picture is so important because of that. And now that there's the Hollywood studios are in effect obsolete, you may have a distributor like Paramount is distributing Killers of the Flower Moon. Well, you got a beautiful logo. And there's stars, and there's water, and there's mountains, and the music comes in, and that's great. Then you have Imperative, which is Dan Friedkin and Bradley Thomas. They have a nice logo. And then I think there's one more logo. That's about it. But other films have maybe 10 logos. I think it's the movie. I said, the movie's starting, and that's got to be the movie. No, wait. Oh, no. So now what? The logos have to be, the logos are distracting to a certain extent, but you really got to start them. How do you start a movie? Rather than just wasting time with showing a character walking in the street. In the old days, that was done. In the transition between the titles that were the Hollywood titles of the old days and then the titles, let's say, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, were usually people walking in the street. And it was getting, in that case, you would get a sense of the neighborhood, you would get a sense of the world they were in. It gives you information, but it was delaying the start of the film, and I wanted to move in faster. I remember the great Fred Zinnemann made From Here to Eternity back in 1953, 54. And the opening scene is all the soldiers drilling, and there are titles over it. But when I met him, he said, we were talking about restoration, and he said, if you get to restore it, would you please, this was in 1992, would you please take the titles off the opening shot? Because it's supposed to be, and I think we're going to try that with Columbia, We're going to say, make a copy of From Here to Eternity with no titles at the beginning on the shot. Or Orson Welles' Touch of Evil. It had all the titles over the opening incredible shot. Well, when they restored the film, Rosenbaum and the others, they took the titles off. And I just saw it for the first time with the titles off. It's a different effect entirely. It's beautiful, I mean, I was used to the other way. It was just as good for me the other way because I was used to that. But this is new, So for me, how you start a story, how fast or what is the first image that should really, really draw the audience in. I find that as risky and as difficult than much before, much more, I must say, you know. Or starting with a montage, for example. Well, Baz Luhrmann does it well, like in Elvis. He went wild. And they just, yeah, you look at that and say, okay, fine. You know.
With him, it's always a ceremony of excess.
Yeah, exactly. The excess is so much. You say, yes, okay. Or the artistry of, say, Pedro Almodóvar's films in terms of the look of the titles are just so beautiful, you know.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about editing, but in a different direction. I'm sure there are a lot of actors here today. Like in every academy, most of the members are actually actors. And of course, when you work with an actor, you want the best actor. You actually get them in order to...
Not always.
Not always.
No, there were periods in my 27 films where nobody would answer the phone. You remember that?
I do. But you still were
It's
with
okay.
Paul Newman when you had trouble.
They came to me. They came to me,
Okay.
though. Okay.
Not
So
a
I
bad
said,
position,
all right,
right?
I'll go with them. Okay.
Okay. So, of course, you want the best in order to invoke real emotions and in order to capture truth. But there's something that it's not usually discussed, which is what you do with performances at the editing room. The way through the edit, you shape also performances, you model them, and you get something that actually never happened on set. I'm not saying that they don't have the credit. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that there's a huge aspect of this that happens at the editing room.
Well, yes, it does. It does. But going back to working with Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver or Mean Streets, for example, we found a trust because he would do things in different takes, and I was able to combine it and make the performance one. And he would trust me to do that. Other big stars at the time were known for taking the film away from the director to recut it. He never did that. And so he trusted me with the shaping of the performance. And I trusted him with the when he would tell me, like in Taxi Driver, he told me, I have this idea. It's kind of crazy. I said, don't tell me. Just do it. And then I would see. And he said, what do you think? It's too much? I said, no, I loved it. I said, do you want to do one less or do you want to do one more? So he'd do one more. And then we'd see in the editing how I'd shape it. Myself and my editor. At that time was not Thelma. It was Marshall Lucas. And so we really perfected that, if one could use that term, in Raging Bull. For him and Joe Pesci, it was written, but there were lots of improvisation around the writing. And the nature of what Thelma was used to was editing very, very interesting documentaries. She always brought the again, that term documentary, but a sense of not narrative cinema, just going with the humanity of the person. And usually, if a documentary had one on, let's say, who was the one who did the geodesic dome, very famous philosopher, anyway, I forget his name now, but she did one on him. She edited that. It was a matter of letting the personality come through in where you edit the documentary. Now people say one line and they cut. But you have to let the person talk. You have to let them talk in a nonfiction film to see who they are. Even the pauses are important. So she has that ability. And so later on, we did Raging Bull and all the films. We're able to have fun with that. But I mean have fun, enjoy that. We really enjoy it. And we try to get everything we can in that performance, meaning our first cuts are quite long in terms of...
and also you have to protect the actor.
Yes, well, there are many times. But you see, what's happened is that I was able to work with De Niro for so long, and he would, especially in Casino, sometimes at some point, Casino became... we're shooting in Las Vegas, 100 days. many of the people in the film are people from Las Vegas, whether they're pit bosses or half a gangster or gangsters who came out of jail, hitmen who went straight but ratted on all their friends to go straight, whatever. And I mean, so it was a madhouse. And very often I'd ask him, just repeat. And then I'd do it in the editing. We had to get out of there. We had to finish as fast as possible. And even that took over 100 days shooting. So in that case, I began to trust him to simply, at times, just repeat a line. Just repeat something 20 times. Then sometimes you forget the line, but it's okay, keep going. Al Pacino in Irishman, eventually he said the lines. Remember, I said, oh my God, what's he? Oh, he's coming back. Where's he going? Okay. Oh, Al, come on, Al. There you go. You got it. That's his technique. I never worked with Al. But his technique was repeating and walking up and down and on and yelling. We're telling, cut it. No. All right, let him go. Just let him go. And then we got it. And then he would do it again. And we got it again. Then he would do it again. And we got it again. Pesci is different, too. Pesci is very much quieter that way. But I never worked with Al. So it was really a matter of, in effect, often if an actor, he or she, we have a kind of enjoyment working together, I do let them go off and do things I'm not going to use. I just know it. Now, that's happened, and I've said it on set, we're never going to use it, and sometimes we have. In the editing, we find, you know what? I got a little bit of this way, a little. But there is a kind of, they could jump up and down or run around, do what they want. And I know that ultimately, if I have the right angle and the right tone, I think I can get the scene. And often I get as much, even in these pictures, Irishman and Silence even, but Irishman and Killers of the Flower Moon, sometimes I do one take. That's enough. Let's go. That sort of thing. Because I know we have it. Dialogue differently. I mean, in The Killers of the Flower Moon, for example, between De Niro and DiCaprio, there's a scene where he wants him to sign a paper that Bob is sitting in the car, and Leo's on the end on them. And he says, I just need you to sign this paper, and everything's going to be fine. And, I don't even know what the paper is, quite honestly, in the story. All I know is that if you sign it, you're dead. And Leo kept saying, should I sign it? I said, I don't know. I'm not sure if you should. Maybe you should sign it. See what happens in the scene. Now, De Niro had hurt his leg. His knee gave out, and he was out of production for a few weeks. So there were scenes where he was supposed to be running around. Well, there were scenes where he's seated because he couldn't move. So this is a scene. He's seated. And, at the end, when you see Leo sign the paper, that's real. He decided the way Bob spoke to him in the scene, he convinced him to sign the paper. He really did. I said, that's beautiful. I didn't have to use it, but I liked it. You see Leo's eyes. He looks around. He knows he's signing his death warrant, but he still has delusion. Oh, Uncle Bill wouldn't do that. Oh, yes, Uncle Bill will. He's going to do it to your wife and to you, and next your children. He's such a weak character. And he vacillates, And so it's that kind of thing in the editing that we had great enjoyment, Thelma and I, shaping those performances,
Well, I definitely need to choose my balls. We don't have so much time. So, Robbie Robertson. Well, he's been your old pal since forever. Unfortunately, he's just gone. He did direct music for you not so often in The Color of Money.
Color of Money was really the first score he did.
Exactly. Now, but he always was your musical director.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I said, could you give me some modern music that people are listening to now for The Departed? Because for me, the films I make, like Irishman, is a period piece, and I know that music. I don't, he gave me some suggestions, but I know all that music from 1948 all the way up. But The Departed, he sent me. I knew the Rolling Stones would start it. I knew Pink Floyd and Van Morrison doing that piece a beautiful piece of music that we have in the film. I forget the name, but they did it at the Berlin Wall. They sang it. And in any event, I had this music throughout. I knew Howard Shore was going to do the score, and I realized that the score should be like a tango, a guitar score, because the tango has passion and could be dangerous. It's like twist, like tangling around and grabbing the other person in a circle and circling and finally come together. And that also came from a movie called Murder by Contract that a man named Irving Lerner directed, a black and white noir made in the 50s, which had a guitar score, very simple film, with Vince Edwards. But the guitar score was sort of based on the third man, the zither. And so I said, why don't we use a guitar very simply and make it feel like a tango? Destiny, just destiny, until finally the elevator door opens and Leo gets shot, you know. And so I said, but Robbie, I need some music from the jukeboxes from where they're in place. And, you know, I can have Laverne Baker, I can have the Stones, but I need something new. So he sent me 3 discs, 3 CDs with some new stuff. And the first thing I put on, the first disc, cut one, was Shipping Up to Boston by the Dropkick Murphys, some wild Irish group, punk group. And I said, that's the movie. The first cut. I said, that's perfect. That plus the guitar, we got it. That's the way he was. Or in Casino, where I did the score myself. The score was 3 hours of American popular music, the songbook, American songbook, and Italian music, and of course, rock and roll or popular music. And at one point he said to me, remember Georges Delerue, Le Mépris. And of course I loved that score. And I realized, yes, why don't we use scores from other movies in our movies? So I guess that was like what they would call sampling now. I don't know in the old days. But I said, well, why don't we take the Delarue score and we mix it with Ginger Baker, Toad, live, Cream, and the drums. And that's what we were doing. And so, and because Le Mépris also, the theme of Le Mépris is similar to what's happening to De Niro and Sharon Stone in Casino anyway. But he would open, because he was not a composer naturally of cinema all the time, he would just come up, it's great to bring ignorance to something, because you don't know, you try. You know, you try, and people say it can't be done, well, why not? You know, and so as long as we pay the rights and as long as we, you know, we can use whatever we want. I mean, Fassbinder was doing that too, back in...
Actually, in The Killers, you recognize him from the first chord. At the beginning, of course, you have the pipe, you have this chant, but then, when the newsreels start, you hear this chord,
yeah,
and in a sec, you know it's Robbie Roberts.
It's Robbie, so yeah.
In a way, this score is like a song without lyrics.
Yes.
So it's simple, but it's powerful, it's specific.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are very long themes, sometimes just a bass or a harmonica, but it's so powerful. Again, you move a finger and the sea opens up.
Well, he knew that too, and I said, I wanted something between the love affair with them, because the movie is based on this love affair, this love that they had, more than an affair. They loved each other, and this is what I was told by the Osage Native Americans, but particularly Margie Burkhart, who was the granddaughter of the character that Leo plays in the film. She told us at a dinner, big dinner the Osage gave us, to straighten us out and said, listen, you know, you got to understand that it isn't just killers and victims, that you have to understand that Molly and Ernest were in love. And then I realized, oh, that's the movie. Now, how could he go along with all that? So, you know, so when I needed music for that theme, I wanted something fleshy, sensual, and dangerous that would build throughout the picture in a way. And so that's what he gave me. Plus, he also gave me these great guitar screeches, like I would hear out in the prairie. I would hear the coyotes. And for a New Yorker, I'm used to other sounds, not coyotes. I'm used to sirens and cabs, but at night, you know, terrifying. you know. And so he get that, wow, that sound with the guitars. Oh my God, the dobro guitars were fantastic. You know, and also introducing elements of rock music in there, because a lot of rock and roll is the original rock and roll from the early 50s, besides the African-American music, was Native American. That the Native American artists, the rock artists, changed their names because they were Indian. And so Link Ray and all these other guys, Link Ray was Apache. And we didn't know, and it's that basic chords of rock and roll were native.
So many questions I cannot ask you, so I'll try to mix three of them in one.
I'll
do my best. You many times use languages of another era. In this case, for instance, silent newsreels. For instance, in life lessons, you do this.
Oh, the iris. Yeah, that iris was an iris that Nestor Almendros had from Francois Truffaut. They used it on L'Enfant Sauvage. And that was the original iris, and so we have to use that. And maybe I overdid it. I'd use it too much, I think, because it was so much fun to do, you know.
Yeah. Or, I don't know, also the Lucky Strike Hour, for instance, when you recreate this
the radio
program,
show, which were real, by the way.
And also when you show how Méliès did his things, and you try to recreate that. When I see that, I feel many things. On one hand, I feel that it's accurate for the scene. But also I feel that you are honoring some tradition, like you are honoring your fathers or your grandpas. Like when you do this radio program, I feel that you are recreating what you felt as a kid, listening to the radio too.
I did listen to the radio, and I was so glad that I grew up listening to radio, because I imagine more from hearing than when I saw a visualization later, because I made the transition from radio to television to movies, you see. And in the case of the radio show in Killers of the Flower Moon, the FBI did do radio shows to promote the FBI. And they did several shows on the Osage murders. The scripts still exist. They're pretty bad. Ours is bad, but it's in the spirit of those shows. But why I chose the show was because after all that tragedy and after all that suffering and all that, in a sense, trauma that everyone has gone through, it became entertainment. And it was entertainment to say, this is a wrong that now has been righted. Okay, we all feel better. Now we can go on to our lives. And so then I thought, well, is this movie just entertainment? The movie I just made. Well, if that's the case, then I better talk at the end. Because if so, then I'm at fault. And so I came out and I did the obituary. And I did it, and my wife Helen was there, and my granddaughter and my other daughter. And I remembered going to the graves of Molly and seeing her and her mother, her father, and her daughters, and the and it hit me. And you could see it. And I didn't realize it would be so emotional for me. I thought if I didn't like my performance, I could reshoot it with another actor. At least I will have known what to tell the actor because I tried it. But I realized, am I also culpable? And I think I am in that sense of, and maybe this was a way of asking forgiveness in a sense. I don't know, but the culpability was interesting because we all felt it that day when we shot. And I also shot that radio show on the stage of an auditorium that we can only find in one place, my old Catholic high school, Cardinal Hayes, up in the Bronx in New York. And so it had a lot of resonance for me. So the radio show is not only a recreation of a homage to a period, but it has all those elements involved.
The scene is wonderful, and the last line is yours. There was no mention of the murders. It's devastating. Well, Mari, it's always a pleasure. You've
Thank
done
you.
a wonderful film, and above all, you have a wonderful career. So please take care of yourself.
I'm trying, yeah.
We need a bunch of films more.
I'd like to do a couple, seriously, like to do a couple more. And you, a wonderful filmmaker, his new film is terrific, Escape. You'll see.
Thank you.